well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. It's single digits temperature-wise here. It's cold, but you're used to that where you're from, right?
Yeah, but, we had 60 degrees yesterday here in our little corner of Montana. It was a Chamber of Commerce type of day.
Kevin, I was telling the guys before we came on the air this morning, there's probably not a bigger FCS football guy than me until I met you and started following you. You got me beat, brother, but there's no better than anything to talk about than the FCS, is there?
You're not kidding. Look, today is a big day. Next week is a huge day for FCS with the Patriot League joining the fray. I think we're going to learn a lot about that league on the first Saturday, don't you?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. And, one of our favorite guests to have on this show, Kevin, is Coach Hunt over at Colgate. And, I've said this all year for the last couple of years with him. Back in 2019, Colgate always plays one of the toughest non-conference schedules, I think, in the entire country. And the year that in 19 they started off 0-7, but they ended up finding a way to win 4 out of the last 5 games. And Coach Hunt and that staff have been there for a long time. They're going to be tough in the Patriot League, but that league from top to bottom is always tough.
It really is, and look, even I was guilty of maybe looking down my nose at the Patriot League a little bit over the years. It's not very often that a 10-1 team gets left out of the playoffs, which has happened to Lehigh twice now, I think,
yep.
over the years.
Yep.
And but when you watch the games, you see that there's talent there. Everybody has it, and it's a really fun league to watch. It's pretty doggone balanced from top to bottom. Anybody can beat anybody. And that's what makes it interesting, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, Kevin, I'll get back to that, but I do want to ask you, I think that your journey and your story to where you're at now are, I'm not going to say very similar to my path, but I'm from a small town here in Rome, New York. Did a little radio in college. Always wanted to have my own radio show and talk sports. Tell us about your journey, because you're a South Carolina guy that's all the way up there in Montana. Talk to us about how you got started.
Well, look, I tried to get a national FCS show on in South Carolina, and I just did it without any success at all. And, I had no training and how to be a broadcaster. I just listened to sports radio and thought, man, I know what not to do now.
Yep.
I'm not going to do Mount Rushmore of FCS. I don't have 3 hours to fill every day or have to come up with nonsense topics to talk about. We're going to cover the games and the stories and the players and the coaches and the fans that make this subdivision so great. But I tried to get the show on at home. I couldn't do it. Came to Montana, started on one station in Missoula, and we've grown exponentially from there. It's been a fantastic ride these last 8 years.
Now, I was reading, because I actually had to pull up some stuff on you, my friend, but talk to us about the Appalachian State-Montana game years ago that changed your career.
Well, I just, look, I grew up around Citadel football. My dad went there, I went there, and going to the games, and, there was a period of time there where, the 4th or 5th place team in the SoCon might have been the 15th or 16th best team nationally. When App was in there and Marshall was in there and Georgia Southern and Furman was really good. So, you would see all these teams and I watched that App State Montana game on television and I wondered, who are these nuts sitting out here, when it's -5 degrees and there's snow everywhere? Little did I know, a couple of years later, some of those nuts would be my drinking buddies and tailgate buddies and some of my best friends. It's kind of a surreal story.
And, Kevin, when the FCS decided they were going to have a spring football, obviously I always say if we can have football at any time of the year, I'll take it no matter how many teams are playing. One of the things that I've talked to a lot of coaches about was the impact of, injuries. If some of the players get hurt, usually spring is a time where guys can kind of rest, get healthy, recover for, fall camp and, summer camp and all that. But, my eyes, and I'm sure in your eyes, having football at any time of the year is great.
It's absolutely great. And, look, when you hear that, we're going to play this many games in this many months, well, it's really, if you don't make the playoffs this spring, some conferences playing 4, some playing 6, some playing 8. If you're in one of those leagues that's playing 4 or 6 games this spring and you don't make the playoffs, well, if you're going to advance from the first round of the playoffs to the championship game, what are you going to play, 15, 16 games, right?
Right.
So it's really not all that different only if you're in one of the leagues playing 4 or 6 games. I think that's kind of a red herring and maybe some cover for some people who maybe were not as interested in playing in the spring as they might have let on when it was announced.
Kevin, were you ever worried or concerned that the FCS wouldn't have a season here in the spring?
Absolutely. I just, people can say what they like, but a lot of these institutions are run by people who like to do what they're told and like to tell people what to do. And I was afraid that how everything canceled in the fall, well, for most everybody, except for 17 teams that played,
yep,
that one would cancel and it would start a domino effect. And as a matter of fact, I just didn't even like to use the word domino during the entire time when
sure.
that was a possibility. So, I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised, but I am surprised that we are where we are.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have FCS football now at any time because, even during the regular season when we're in the normal football year, which hopefully we'll have in the fall, you see a lot of these FCS schools that are beating some of the big guys now. And I've always said this, just because it's Division I AA, they're still great athletes. They might have been athletes that chose an FCS school over a Power 5 school for whether it's family reasons or maybe they just couldn't make it at Alabama, because if you go to Alabama, you're going to be probably third string for at least 3 years. But there's a lot of good talent in the FCS.
Yes, and that's why I never want to second-guess a decision that a 17 or an 18-year-old young man makes. But I think I'd want to play, wouldn't you? If I could go somewhere and play as a freshman and a sophomore versus sitting there and practicing for 3-4 seasons to play when I'm a senior, I think I'd rather play because you don't get those years back, and I think I'd rather remember them playing football versus watching it from the sideline and practicing and getting beat up. That's just me. So I often wonder why someone wants to go to Alabama and be the fifth left tackle when they could go to Lafayette and be the starting left tackle.
Yeah, no.
Scratch my head.
Absolutely. And Kevin, I want to talk about the Big Sky. I know you're familiar with that conference with Montana and Montana State up there. They had 5 teams that opted out up there, and that conference over the last couple seasons, they've had the most teams make it to the quarterfinals. And this is a huge step back, but they still got Weber State there.
Weber State is fantastic, and it appears that they found themselves a quarterback. He was outstanding last week. Of course, they're off this week due to some contact tracing issues with Cal Poly. But, look, I was to say that I'm disappointed that they're not playing football here in Missoula or in Bozeman is an understatement. They waited to the last minute to announce it, and I think they knew all along they weren't going to try and play. And I have much more respect for Sac State, who announced way a long time ago the spring wasn't for them and they weren't going to play, versus, the 2 weeks before, everybody was starting to ramp up, the Grizz and Bobcats both announced on back-to-back days they're not playing in the spring. If you knew that, why didn't you just say it?
Well, and that's what I kept saying is if you knew this the whole time, why lead these players, fans, thinking that we're going to have a season and 2 days before, you opt out? If you know it, just come out and say it. I'd have more respect for you if you do that.
Absolutely, and it put the Big Sky Conference in a bad position. They had already made the schedule, so they had to go back and redo it. So, and look, we've all seen that scheduling games, doesn't need to be a 10-year in advance deal anymore. Heck, how many times did we see this fall teams schedule games for Saturday on a Monday?
Absolutely.
So, but still, involving travel, involving, the ability for fans to get there if they're allowed. I thought it was a very poor way to do it that those two schools chose that route to backing out of the spring.
And, Kevin, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, too, is the Missouri Valley Conference, who, this year there's 10 teams in there. One team had opted out, but always one of the top conferences in the FCS with, of course, North Dakota State. But preseason they had 5 teams ranked in the top 15. And we saw North Dakota State go down, but I'm still not ruling them out yet. How good's the Missouri Valley?
It's always very good, but, look, when you were looking at the 2 deep for that first game that Northern Iowa played, I mean, there were people who, much more knowledgeable than me, saying, hey, I follow this program, and I've never heard of some of these guys. There were so many oars on the depth chart that people, went looking for an and but the MVSC, look, it's strong, but, look, we're going to find out a lot about North Dakota State today. It has been absolutely easy to be one of their fans for a long, 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 long time. You win every week, no setbacks. And we're going to find out this week what that football team is made of. Actually, today we're going to find out what that football team is made of. Look, we all know that, you can't press and play football. They have to go out there and play Missouri State. Bobby Petrino is a fine coach. He's been just about everywhere. And he'll have them ready to go. And this thing, I'm not predicting it'll happen, but anybody who will tell you that, that North Dakota State might not implode today, well, they're not being all that honest with you, are they? Because that could happen. They put the ball on the ground early, get behind, this thing could snowball on them. And I'll tell you what, a month ago, that was just unbelievable that would be possible.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Kevin, you mentioned Bobby Petrino, but here's the other thing I always argue and tell people that, the FCS has a lot of good college football coaches. They could coach anywhere in the country. People just don't know about some of them because they're not on TV every week.
It's true. Look, and you have some of the guys who, I think with what happened at Youngstown State, I think Bo Pelini thought he could come from Nebraska, and, just with his inner genius that he, thought he was, could come in and, well, I can be on the sideline here. I can be on the sideline at any FCS school, and we'll win the national championship. Well, he found out. There's a lot of good coaches at this level. Some of them are here because they want to be, and some of them are here because they're young into their career, and they have aspirations to move on to bigger and better things. But I'll tell you, bigger, not necessarily better, but bigger. And I'll tell you, when you look at the staff, it's amazing. The amount of experience, the amount of, want to. And I think, look, it's a smaller version of a family, right? And with the head coaches that we have, I think they really mean it at the FCS level. At the next level up, I think you're kind of a spare part if you're a player. I'll plug you in there, you'll be fine. I'm not quite sure how much caring goes on.
No, for sure. Well, Kevin, listen, I'm excited to be part of your FCS Nation Radio and talk some Patriot League football with you. It's an honor having you on here, and I know we'll talk next week, but let's do it again soon.
Anytime, Rocky. It was a pleasure to be with you. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts about the Patriot League on the show. I know you'll bring a lot to the table. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
So you guys know I can talk FCS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's good.
He's really good.
Yeah, Kevin's done a really good job. And, he didn't really talk about too much about the story of where he started or where he's at now. But, again, this is a guy that had no communications background, no broadcasting background, and moved from South Carolina all the way to Montana just to start this thing.
Just a guy who loves his football.
And now it's a nationally syndicated show across numerous radio stations, and I'm excited to talk Patriot League football. And I think he said, when he said the Lehigh, Lehigh finished 10-1 a couple of years and didn't make the playoffs. And Colgate made it because Colgate won the Patriot League, but Colgate beat Lehigh that year. But Lehigh finished 10-1 and didn't get in. So the Patriot League's good football. You guys know we always talk Patriot League here, and I'll do my take next week. But the preseason Patriot League rankings came out. They have Holy Cross received 5 votes. They finished 7-6. They won the Patriot League back in, sounds like forever ago, 2019. Colgate picked second. They received 2 votes, they received 4 votes. Fordham's picked third. Lafayette's picked fourth. Lehigh's picked fifth. Bucknell is picked sixth. But, after Holy Cross, guys that won it in 2019, the entire conference finished 4-8. So it was a really competitive Patriot League in 2019. And one of the names you're going to hear a lot of is the quarterback over at Fordham, Tim DeMorad, who's a junior, threw for over 2,600 yards, which was a league best in 2019. Fordham returns the entire offense. They had the top-rated offense in 2019, but Holy Cross is your winner. And I still think that Coach Hunt's going to make some noise because that team, a lot of players were originally going to opt out and not play. They all decided to come back, and they finished 4-1 down the stretch. After losing 7 straight, so they'll be ready to play.
Most of that was that brutal out-of-conference schedule they always play. He did mention, I heard when I came back in at the end there, you were talking about North Dakota State.
Yep.
They had that big loss last week. Didn't they have their star quarterback opt out for the season up in North Dakota State?
But I think he decided to come back. I didn't do too much research on the Missouri Valley. I just know that when you talk FCS football, of course, North Dakota State's the giant. They're the Alabama of the FCS.
Yeah.
But that Missouri Valley with North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Northern Iowa, Illinois State, and North Dakota, 5 of the best teams in the FCS year in and year out. But, my biggest question to Kevin was, and he follows Montana football better than all of us because he lives out there, was they had Montana, Montana State, Northern Colorado, Portland State, and Sacramento State all opted out to not play. In that league, the last 2 seasons, they've had the most teams make it to the national semifinals over the past couple of years. But like he said, Weber State is really good and can win a national title.
Wow.
So, but thanks, Kevin, for taking the time to come on. I appreciate it, and I look forward to doing some Patriot League football with you over the course of the next month and a half or so. So we're going to take our last break. When we come back, we'll wrap things up here on the Mohawk Valley Sports Watch. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I want to get my girl some diamond earrings, but I don't know the first thing about diamonds.
I was pretty clueless, too, but I got Sue's engagement ring at Engelbert's Jewelers. They're the diamond authority. They helped me every step of the way.
At Engelbert's Jewelers, we can answer every question you have and help you with this most special gift from